Hello, I'm Catherine Webster, and this is my story, the truth about what my girls, what my family are going through and have gone through in LA and California, in the abuse and the discrimination they face and have faced for such a long time. In the last show, I shared with the viewers about the first hospital visit. And as the week went on, this last week, there are parts of it that you think of during the week and you say, you know, I didn't get a chance to say everything because there's limited time. At one point, when all the different people, and I say people loosely, entities, were in the hallway, my daughter was trying desperately to keep Michelle calm because she had just had a heart incident. We were in the acute cardiac unit at that point. And she was trying to keep her calm, so Katie and Michelle stayed in the room, and I had gone out into the hallway and dealt with the people out there. I had demanded that the administration come down and that the cardiologist had come down. And they said, the administration's not coming. We'll let the cardiologist know. And ultimately, I went back in the room, and he did come down, and he came into the room, and he said, ladies, I have to tell you, we need to go. We need to go as soon as possible. I have a paperwork for you, Katie, he said, and I need you to sign it. And Katie said, well, I'm going to sign it under duress because this is horrible. And we were getting ready to go. We were leaving, and they escalated this. And he said, Katie, they want to escalate this more. He said, I need to impart to you how important it is that we leave as soon as possible because they are dedicated to instigating this. And he said, I have talked to them, and we need to go. And he was afraid, and he was nervous. And he kept saying, we have to go, get everything together, we have to go. And at one point, Katie said, I'm not going to leave without this paper. You need to make a copy. And he was very upset to hear that. But he sent to a nurse to get the copy and brought it back. And then he said, we have to leave now. So we gathered what we had, and he walked us out of the hospital. And he walked us all the way down through the elevator, down to the lobby, and out the door onto the cement. He literally didn't leave us until we were outside of the hospital on the cement. And I kept saying to him, have you ever, what is this? What's happening? Are you going to make note of this in the records? Are you going to make note that they threw my granddaughter out and could have caused another heart incident? Are you going to make notes of this? And he just kept looking like he couldn't believe it. He looked at one point like he was tearing up. And then we left. And I did thank him before we left for escorting us out and keeping us at least that safe, because we were not in a safe environment in that hospital, and it felt dangerous in that room. It felt like an emergency situation in that room, and it felt like they were going to escalate it, and they had every intention of doing harm to my granddaughter. It was just horrific. And when we got out on the street, Katie and I were in such shock that we really didn't know what to say to each other. We just started walking away. And in our efforts to keep Michelle calm, we kind of tried to make light conversation, and we walked back to the house. The girls were still in their apartment at this time, of course. This was in December. And so none of us felt well. The extreme devastation of what had happened and the stress. On top of the stress that had just taken place that entire week, worrying about Michelle's health, my daughter my daughter didn't sleep the entire week. She laid on the bed with Michelle and watched her every second, never left the room. I slept on a little couch in the room, so I at least got a little bit of rest. My daughter never really slept that entire week. She was exhausted, she was terrified, and never left Michelle's side the entire week. And then to be put in a position like this is so horrific that we had no words. We didn't even really know what to say to each other. We just walked in silence. We got back to the apartment, and none of us, of course, felt well. We were reacting to the adrenaline and the terrible abuse. And at that point, Katie and I had a very difficult discussion. Katie said, you know, we're going to be able to stay until April 1st. Mom, I desperately need you out here for that day. That week before, because I have to go back to court and deal with the slumlord's lawyer. And she said, I have to have you out here, and I know that you can't stay the whole time. So it was devastating, but it was decided that I would come home and do what I could from here to try to get help out there, talk to different people, agencies, that Katie would talk to agencies, hopefully be able to get the people from the regional center that were supposed to be looking out for Michelle's well-being because of her disabilities, getting them to do something. And we both were still very naive in the thought that this would be taken care of because of Michelle's disadvantages and disabilities. We thought, surely somebody will get hold of it. Somebody. This, you know, we just had no idea that all the cards were going to be stacked against my girls, all of them. And so I came back grudgingly, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And this whole year has been the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And I've had a lot of hard things to do in this life. And this was so terrible that I was ill on the plane. I came back home, and I stayed in bed for 2 days out of the fear and distress of what could have happened to my granddaughter and what might still happen. And so I did that. I made the calls. I tried so hard. Katie tried so hard. And at that point, after a bit, still there was no resolution in sight, and these people just weren't doing what they're paid to do, to find some kind of assistance, some kind of housing. And then in March, I went back out. I thought, okay, time is of the essence, and you know, I have to be here for this meeting with the lawyer at the courthouse, and for lockout. And now we are certainly running out of time, and we have to get you in somewhere as soon as possible. So at that point, still getting nowhere. And Katie was making out all the necessary paperwork, telling all of her most important business to total strangers over and over, some of these meetings lasting 4 hours. And during that time, I was looking after Michelle, of course. And at that point, Willie wasn't feeling well at that point either. He hadn't gone into the hospital for his amputation yet, but he wasn't feeling very well. And we ultimately went to the courthouse. And it was supposed to be to meet with this lawyer. We got there. She walked up to us, said, I'll be back in a minute to talk with you, and then walked away. And after about quite some time, we looked up and saw her walk right by us with some other people. And some more time went by, and Michelle's getting upset and tired. And, you know, there again in the courthouse, such a violent, negative energy, such a heavy, oppressive energy. I went to a phone and I called her and I said, you've walked by us a couple of times. What's going on? And she said, you know, you are going to be locked out on April 1st. And what we thought was going to happen today isn't going to happen. And I said, okay, this actually was after lockout. I think it was after lockout. We were already locked out, so I've jumped ahead a little bit. But It was such an emotional, chaotic time. And, okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Katie, I was watching Michelle, and Katie was trying everything to get into housing. And just prior to April 1st, we had to find a motel. We were trying to find storage, move as much as we could. Very, very difficult, very expensive. Storage, moving, very expensive, very difficult. Needing money for the motels and trying to find some place to get into so that when April 1st came, the girls wouldn't be on the street. And so that's what we were doing. And every day took that up in that effort. And we did get a motel room. And the night before lockout, they had the sheriff come, and I had been to the house and had seen them put it on the very front of the house. And I said, this is so the whole street knows now. There's not even any anonymity here. They also put one on the door to the apartment, more of their abuse. And so I got what I could, and then went to the motel. The bottom line of it is they were locked down on April 1st, and we weren't able to get very much out at all. So due to extenuating circumstances, my son-in-law, his ashes were still in the apartment. So because Katie was focused so much on making sure Michelle's feet didn't hit the ground as far as homeless, and we had a place to stay, her husband's ashes were still in the apartment. And so that day at court, when I talked to the lawyer, I said, listen, she said, he's going to put everything out on the street. And I said, he's going to put my son-in-law out on the street too. And she said, yeah. I said, listen, we have one request. We're so upset at this point. We have one request. When he finds the urn of my son-in-law, will he take it to the manager in the building, and we will get the phone call and come and get him. We'll come and get him. Now, if you've ever been on the verge of being homeless and you have a disabled child, that child, as much as you love your spouse, as much as you love that person, that child is everything. She has to come first, and she came first. But what happened next was so cruel and so hideous and so beyond the pale that it went to a whole new level of cruelty. He literally threw my son-in-law's ashes in the trash. He refused to give them to my daughter. He threw them in the trash. And at that point, we were living day to day in this motel. Willie was extremely ill. Michelle had had another incident in March in the hospital. And all of these things were so intense and so upsetting and disruptive. We were not able to get my son-in-law out. And he put everything out on the street. I went back, I searched for my son-in-law on the street. I found my grandbaby's little bicycle, some of her toys. There's a church nearby, very close by. So I took what I could carry, which wasn't a lot, to the churchyard. And I knew the priest there, the vicar there. He was a very nice fellow. And I knew he would be okay with that as long as it wasn't all over the place. I put it off to the side a little bit, what I could retrieve. Watching my granddaughter's stuff be put out on the street was so gut-wrenching. But in all of that, you still have that one thing in your mind that your focus laser beamed on, and that is, she's not on the street. We just have to make sure that doesn't happen, and that she also is fed and taken care of. So everything else fell away. It's devastating to see your grandbaby stuff on the street, but it's stuff. It was the throwing away of my son-in-law that was so horrific for my daughter and granddaughter. And of course, my granddaughter, she can say some words. She can speak up to the point where she has very good social cues. She knows what people are saying and doing. She's very bright. Full sentences are hard, but we've worked with her. But she's considered nonverbal. So it's very hard for her to just come out in a full sentence and say, I'm devastated that daddy's in the trash. I'm devastated that we have no home. I'm devastated that mommy's so upset. And so this had gone on after April 1st. And at that point, we were in this motel. Now, in a motel, you have the room you can get, and it might be available the next day, and it may not. And then you either go to another motel and take everything that you could retrieve with you, or you're on the street. So you have to pray there'll be another room in the motel, or that you can stay there for a few days and try to get what little bearings you can. Now, I leaped ahead a little bit because, as I said, this was an extremely horrific, chaotic time. The whole thing has been. But when I went out in March, and I went out fairly early in March, for that time that I was gone, the girls had stayed in the apartment, and Michelle had stayed, knock wood, she hadn't had to go back into what we call the dump and the hospital. And so when I got back in March, the stress of the impending eviction was so stressful at that point that Michelle became ill again. And this stress accentuates what goes on, of course. For any illness anyone has when they're under a huge amount of stress, it triggers. But these conditions are conditions that she was born with. So the hospital and all these people know these are conditions that Michelle was born with, and that stress accentuates it. So this regional center person, Eileen, she knew this. And yet there was no effort whatsoever to get housing for the girls, and no real communication. So we had to keep calling her to say, is anything coming? Because we have a situation here where Michelle had heart situations and issues in December, and we're headed into April, and nothing's been resolved. March is when I went back, and shortly after I got back, one of the disabilities that Michelle was born with was aggravated. And to say that we were devastated to go back is an understatement. We were very, very hesitant to go back. But as I've stressed before, she was still there in that neighborhood, and we had to go somewhere fast, and that's the closest place. And we thought, okay, we'll go to the emergency room, that we've been treated kindly there. Maybe they can resolve it in the emergency room, and we won't have to go upstairs, because upstairs has a different energy and a different oppressive violence to it than the emergency room is somehow feels different. So we took her to the emergency room, and they were kind to us there. And we said, look, we'll do whatever we have to for Michelle, but we beg you, we don't want to go back up on that floor. If we have to go back upstairs, we don't want to go to that floor. We had a terrible time there, and we were told to leave. We were thrown out because we weren't going fast enough. That was their entire thing. You're just not leaving fast enough. Just bogus abuse. And so we said, if we can resolve it downstairs, please, for the love of God, let's do it. And they said, we can't. we're going to send you upstairs, but it's a different floor. When we got upstairs, there again, got a doctor who seemed to be kind and understand the situation. And we said, listen, we have a lot going on. Michelle's our first priority. We cannot have a repeat of what happened before. We can't do it. We just can't take it. It's something went terribly. They just, no, we can't live through that. We're under enough pressure already. And he said he understood, and that everyone that came in the room understood what had happened, and would be kind and gentle and try to get Michelle better. And at one point, there was talk of maybe having to do some type of blood transfusion. So there again, we were out of our minds with fear. As it turned out, the blood workup showed that that wasn't the case, thank the Lord. We spent quite a number of days there, and Katie never left Michelle's side, as always. Slept right beside her, took care of her. The nurses really don't have that much to do. Katie does most of it. She's very proficient in this. She's done it since the day Michelle was born, and she knows her better than anybody. It's her child. She knows her cues. They have their own little language that they understand that no one else can ever understand or begin to breach. And so the days went by, and we tried to relax a little bit, and we said, okay, listen, when you get ready to discharge us, you've got no time limit, but apparently with the viciousness that happened before, we need to be aware so that that doesn't happen again. And if there's like a time limit or something, we need to know. And so this doesn't happen again, because it was too much to go through. And the doctor was like, no, we're going to make sure everything's okay. We're going to make sure everything's all right. Try to relax. Like, we're going to, and for that time, the nurses seemed to cooperate. The doctor was cooperative. We kind of trusted that a little bit, that maybe that was just this horrendous thing, but we were on a different floor with different people, and maybe this would go better. And then we could go back to the girl, we were still at the apartment in March. Lockout was April 1st. And so we thought, okay, we can let our guard down a little bit. This kind of feels like it's going to be all right. And then the day came when we were going to be discharged. And the day before, we had already started putting the stuff we'd accumulated and stuff together, so that we would be well out ahead of this and never have to go through that situation again. Although not going fast enough was not their true motivation. That's a bogus claim. They simply, there's something deeper going on here, because my son-in-law died upstairs in that hospital, and they have always somehow held it against my daughter. Like, how dare your husband die in our precious, world-famous hospital? How dare he do that? Instead of compassion or kindness, they've always held it against my daughter somehow in their deluded, demonic thinking. And you can feel it when they come in around my daughter. They've already taken, some of them have taken a set against her already. You can feel the energy. It's very uncomfortable, and I read energy, so I know what they're thinking and the way they look at my grandbaby. It's like my daughter's presence, my grandbaby's presence reminds them of that day. But we're reminded of that day because it was our family. So whatever they think happened, they don't put themselves in Katie's shoes when my granddaughter lost their husband and father. They don't think of that. There's no compassion there. And it's normal. I found it's very normal with so many people in that city to normalize abuse and cruelty. It's like a normal, almost pack mentality of some of these people in the hospital, that one nurse will talk to another nurse. Oh, she's the one whose husband died upstairs. Yeah. There's like a pack mentality, not a pack. Wolves are a very noble, beautiful, loyal animal. I just love wolves, and these people should not be equated with a pack of anything, because animals are better. But the point is, they clan together, they huddle together in their abuse, and their energy and their darkness feeds off each other. So if you've had trouble with one nurse, you're going to have trouble with another nurse. And if you've had trouble with one doctor, you're going to have trouble with another doctor, because they all talk with each other, and they all share this normalcy of the way they treat my family. And so we prayed against, we just hoped maybe we could get out of there without an incident. And so the doctor came in and said, I think it's okay if Michelle leaves. We're going to have you go. And Katie said, we're putting our stuff together. Okay, we're putting our stuff together. We're going to get out of here. We're going. We don't want to be here anyway. We're going. And Katie's putting her stuff, all the different things, on the bed. And there were some things that were still on the couch in the room. We're trying to put things together, trying to get Michelle's little shoes on and stuff, and here comes the first knock. That vicious, urgent knock. I go over, I open the door, I said, what is it? When are you going to be gone? When are you leaving? I said, we're getting ready to leave, right? We're leaving. Okay. Now began a pattern of nurses coming in, different nurses. Never saw some of these people before. They don't identify themselves. You don't know who you're dealing with. Coming to the door and say, when are you leaving? Okay, if you leave us alone, we'll go. You're taking up time. You should have been gone already. Okay, now you're distracting us, and you're taking up time. Leave us to it, and we will leave. And then 2 more would come in. And then 4 would come in. And now, of course, Katie's very nauseous, not feeling well at all. Michelle's getting very upset. Katie's trying to keep Michelle calm. And I emptied the room. I said, out. Everyone out. You're upsetting my girls. We went out into the hallway. I said, what is going on now? Now you know at that point, okay, they've already instigated, they're already escalating, they want you to do something so that they can turn this around, because their stock in trade is victim blaming and their absolute abuse of power, especially with the security. If you say one thing they don't like or any tone, the first thing they do is get security. This is their power play. This is their abuse of power in a hospital with a little child who just very shortly before that might have needed a blood transfusion. Thankfully, thank God she didn't, but she may have had to. They don't care. They didn't care. So I hear my daughter in the bathroom throwing up and crying because it's happening again. And there's nothing can be done. There's no help coming. I said, I want the victim, the hospital patient advocate down here now. I want administration down here now. Is there no one who is an advocate to my daughter and granddaughter? No one in this hospital? There's supposed to be somebody here. Social workers walking up to me, different people walking up to me, maybe nurses, maybe head nurses. None of them really ever had anything but one of them turned their badge around so I couldn't see it. I said, don't even bother to turn it around. If I want to know who you are, I will find out who you are someday. But you know what you're doing is shameful and hideous, so that's why you don't want me to know who you are. And I said, everyone's staying out. Leave my girls alone. You've got my girl throwing up in the toilet right now. She's vomiting. out of fear of what could happen. And once again, the terrible, horrible stress that my girls were under already. So they're saying, well, you need to get going. At one point, I go back in the room and I hear another knock on the door, and it's a nurse that said, and there again, no communication as far as who these people are, just random people who've decided to cluster together, I guess that's the best term, cluster together and feed into each other's darkness in evil ways and just try to destroy my family. And she said, I want to come in and put everything that you own on the bed. Let me see what you've got. And I said, what? At that point, because my daughter is very ill at that point and my grandbaby could have another attack, I said, listen, this is not Nazi Germany. Now, I hate throwing that word around because that is it has a horrible, I don't think people understand just how hideous and horrible that term really is to describe the people that it really was. I don't use that lightly, but the way they were acting, like we were in a communist country where they could just come in and take our stuff or see what we were doing. I said, you're not going to invade our privacy like that. We have our stuff on the bed. You're not going to see it. You're not looking at it. You need to just back off right now. You need to back off. You're not coming in around my girls. And at one point I had to go out and say, is the doctor coming? Is there any sign of the doctor? Okay, now here comes the doctor. And the doctor walks in with two nurses and says, you've had enough time. You need to leave. And changed his complete demeanor, became a whole different person. The energy and the demonic entities around him had somehow changed up his demeanor. And now he is standing there saying, you've had plenty of time. And we said, plenty of time? Every time we try to put stuff together, someone comes in and attacks us. You are the people that are wasting time. You are the people that are instigating this. We would have already been gone a long time ago. And now here you come in as the doctor who just took care of Michelle for these 5, 6 days. And now you're standing here, you see my daughter's ill. We just wanted to be able to leave. We just wanted to be able to not have this happen again. Why is this happening again? And he said, you've had time, and we need you to go. We need you to go right now. Get your stuff and go. So they left. And I said, Katie, I'm going to take care of this, honey. Just try to stay calm. Try to keep Michelle calm. We're going to get out of here. I'm going to take care of this. Okay, and now my daughter's upset and she's mad. Because you get to a certain point now, you've put her child in harm's way again, and now Katie's getting mad. Because through the devastation and everything, you come to a point where you say, I've just had it with this. This is just, no, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. I just spent a week with my sick baby. Never left once. Worried she'd need a blood transfusion. And now they're pulling this again. And now Katie's getting upset and angry. I said, Katie, do not go near them. This is what they want. They want you to get upset and angry. They want to instigate this. They want to turn it against you. We're not playing that game. Let me go out and deal with this. So now there's another knock on the door. We have everything together. We're ready to go. We have everything together, even in spite of all the interference and the abuse. We've gotten our stuff together. It's in bags. It's in the little wagon. We're getting ready to go. And there's another sharp knock on the door, and I open the door to 2 security guards. And I'm standing in the door. They're right in front of me, right up to my face. You need to leave now or we're calling LAPD and have you trespassed. And I said, what kind of hellish nightmare are we in? You know In your mind, you know, this is wrong. This is horrible. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? You need to go now. We've been told to call LAPD and have you trespassed if you don't go right now. I said, okay. And they tried to come in the door. I said, I said, you're not going near my girls. Just stay out here. We have our stuff. We're leaving. You're not going near my girls. You're not going to do this to my girls. It's not going to happen. Okay, then you need to leave. So I said, Katie, Michelle, come with me. I said to them, we're leaving. So they backed up. And I said, okay, we've come to this hospital most of all of Michelle's life. And this year we come in, and twice this has happened. Now, we have all kinds of other parents walking by us, looking at us like we've done something wrong, snickering and laughing, because I'm trying to impart to the larger world that when you normalize brutality and you normalize abuse and you overlook every disability right that was ever put in a bill or on the books, like it never happened, and you're in medieval Europe, then it's contagious to other people. And then they start to see it as normal. And there's nothing normal about it. And parents going by with their children gawking at us and laughing like they're being told to leave. So now we have two guards, security guards, and I have my daughter here, my granddaughter here. We're walking out with our possessions. And one of them comes up behind Katie, and Katie pulls her phone out and said, I'm videotaping you people. I'm videotaping you. And they said, you can't videotape in here. And she said, I have a First Amendment right. I said, remember the Constitution, if you will. I'm sure you won't. But remember, my daughter has a First Amendment right. And so she's taping one of the nurses and one of the security guards. As we're trying to go out around, and Katie's trying to keep that security, he actually smiled into the camera, proud of his abuse. I know it's impossible to believe. It's impossible for us to believe. Even though we lived it, we don't even really go near the subject because it's so horrific that you have to numb your mind toward it a little bit to have gotten through it. And you have to to go on, have to kind of put it somewhere in your head where you say, I know it happened and I know we lived it, but it's so horrible that we can't dwell on it. And so when I came back home, I didn't tell anybody. The first time I'm saying this is in front of this camera. I couldn't go through it to tell anybody when I got home. It was too hard. In order to help my girls, I'm reliving it on camera so that ultimately my girls will get help. The help they've deserved from the very beginning. And Willie will get help because he's part of the family. Even though they say out there to Katie, he's not part of the family. He is part of our family. And so we're walking out into the lobby and we're trying to keep Michelle safe, keep them away from Michelle. And then two other security guards came up behind us. And as we're getting on the elevator, the two security guards in front of us motioned to a third security guard to get on the elevator with us. And I said, do you think there's enough of you? Do you think there's enough? 3 security guards? The brutality. They take us down in the elevator, all of them with these faces of just complete acceptance of their brutality. Their little power game, their little power struggle over 3 people that have just been through hell and continue to go through hell and had gone through hell in December. And 3 females, by the way, too. And I said, I kept reiterating, you're not going to touch anybody. You're not touching my girls. And we got down to the lobby. They walked us out. And as they walked us out to the door, they wouldn't even let us walk into the lobby and walk out. The three of them walked us to the door, and then two by the door kind of looked at us threateningly. So that would make five. And then we got out on the street, and there's a bench out on the street. And we went and sat on the bench. And that's when Michelle, who couldn't take it anymore, who was, of course, reading her mother and my energy, and knew the danger, and knew how she was being brutalized, and knew what they were doing, why it felt so unsafe, went into a complete hysteric situation, and literally started trying to beat her head on the cement. And Katie screamed, and we grabbed her. At that point, everything in us was just to calm her down. Katie knows how to do it after all these years. Michelle was just so overcome with terror and couldn't articulate it or scream or anything, so she just did what she could to show her distress. And there were people outside of the hospital perimeters on the sidewalk with a microphone. And I said, Katie, I'll be right back. Honey, stay right there on the bench. I'll be right back. And I ran over and I said, can I use your microphone? Can I use your microphone? And they said, no, we have something we're doing here. I said, okay, then I'll have to do this another time. And I went back to the girls. And this time when we walked away, it wasn't, we couldn't say, well, that was just horribly bizarre and terrible, and we can't believe that happened. This is a pattern. It was a pattern now. It was done on purpose, both times. And both times it was, you're not going fast enough. But we couldn't go any faster than we were because we were being harassed and harangued and put in a position where we felt Michelle's life, of course, was in danger. She had a heart incident just in December. We went back to the house, and the girls calmed down a little bit, and I went to a nearby restaurant and got them a little something to eat. And kind of numbed our minds to it in a way to keep getting through. And it was just incomprehensible. But they have normalized their abuse to the point where, to them, when one starts the abuse, then the rest accelerate it, and I've never heard of anything like this before in my life. Now, that's not to say it hasn't happened to someone somewhere, or that this won't be something that someone can watch and say, you know, if I'm aware of something like this, you know, it's a terrible thing. It's not normal to throw people that have been extremely ill, especially a little disabled child, in a LA Children's Hospital that is supposed to, on their sign, this is where you're safe, this is where everyone's safe, this is where a child comes to be safe. That's not true. It's not true for my family. I don't know if it's happened to anyone else. I dare say it hasn't. It would be my fervent belief that it hasn't happened there before. I don't know if it's ever happened anywhere else, but it's happened to us twice. They knew my daughter had the video. They knew it. So, as they are so good at doing, they retaliated. And I want to say that at this point, the hospital contacted the authorities and said, Katie brings Michelle in, she brings her too often and doesn't bring her enough. Okay, more of the bogus foolish, nonsensical foolishness. We dealt with that. I called the supervisor and I said, listen, I told her exactly what happened with the hospital. I told her this is pure retaliation. No one can say my daughter isn't a fantastic mother that stays with her daughter continuously during the hospital visit. This is exactly what happened. Yes, we take her into the emergency room, and then because Michelle is fragile, after an emergency room visit and hospital visit, they do a telephonic so that we don't have to take her back in. And the hospital has gone with that for years. It's happened for years. Now they're saying that Katie doesn't do follow-up visits. I said, all this is extreme retaliation for their own wrongdoing. This is their victim blaming, because this is what they do. And the woman herself said, listen, it does seem strange to me. It's not adding up. They have allowed it for years, and they never had an issue, and now they have an issue, and that makes no sense to me. That makes no sense to me. Obviously, if they will do a telephonic and you don't have to take Michelle in and expose her to whatever could be in there and have her go back in, that makes sense. The woman understood the reality of the situation and the fact that it was a bogus. We take her in too much, we don't take her in enough. Make up your mind, you psychotic lunatics. Make up your mind. At that point, we called the Easter Seals women and said, the hospital's insisting that we follow up with a physical. Will you come with us? And they ultimately said no. So Katie and I and Michelle went. This is Katie and Michelle and I are in a motel at this point. In fact, at that point, because the hospital that Willie was in decided to throw him out on the street, we took him in and Katie took care of Willie. And so he was at the motel at that point. At that point, we had no choice but to go in for this physical. The day we went in, the three of us went in, and Michelle was clean, new clothes, new shoes, and during the physical, it was decided she had actually gained weight. And even being in this situation of being homeless, Michelle was gaining weight and looked great. And the doctor, who was probably one of the ones involved in all this, was upset that Michelle was gaining weight. So that was, of course, confirmation. And we said, this child is adored. She's adored. And before any of the rest of us eat or anything, she comes first at all times. And so shortly after that, it was confirmed that this was bogus and it was completely ended. However, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to when I got back home, much, much later. I got a phone call from the social worker that had actually been there the day Michelle almost died of the heart incident. She had been in the room when they were going to administer the medicine to Michelle, and that was in the last show. And she called me and said, Kathy, administration wants me to know, now this is after I got back in the spring, wants you to know you're not allowed in LA Children's Hospital at any time anymore. And I said, I'm trespassed? Is that it? I haven't gotten any paperwork. I mean, how are you going to trespass me? And why is this? Put me on the phone to administration. I want to hear it from them. And she said, no, they're going through me. I said, well, that's not good enough. What have I done? You make other people uncomfortable. I said, I make other people uncomfortable? You mean when I was trying to keep people from manhandling my disabled granddaughter and my widowed daughter, when I never swore, never raised my voice, and we got out of there with no physical harm because we stayed so icy cold, and still because we knew you wanted to instigate us into that behavior where you can't say one thing about anything that we did in any regard. And I said, funnily enough, when I was out there, I went to the physical we had to go to, which proved Michelle was in fine shape at that point, of course. Gaining weight, new clothes, new shoes. No one could have ever known Michelle was homeless at that point. She was in a motel, able to bathe, everything. Katie, make sure. I went in with the girls for the physical. There didn't seem to be any problem whatsoever. You didn't make me leave then. Well, you can't come in now. They didn't know I wasn't still out there at that point. They didn't know I had gone home. I didn't want them to know that. I said, so what you're essentially doing is you're taking the person who out of the equation that is their witness, that does try to help them, that does try to protect them. You're trying your best to keep them out of me out of the equation entirely for their sake. So they are completely helpless in that place the next time. Well, you make people uncomfortable. I said, well, I'm about to make people very uncomfortable. I said, I am going to bring this to the fore. You will see that. I got off the phone with them, and I got on the phone with Health and Safety, a commission in LA, and said I want them investigated, and told them the whole situation, and said I want them investigated. And they were investigated, although they never talked to any of the people involved, and they never talked to the cardiologist, which would have been the first thing most people would think would have been done. And they came back to me saying, you know, if something else happens, contact us. But they said they did what they did. They weren't apologetic. And that's that. No explanation to the agency, and the agency didn't seem all that excited to get an explanation. They did go in and talk to them, but there was no real investigation. Of course, because that place is protected. It's a very old hospital, a very famous hospital. And you can call lawyers as far as New York City, you can call who you want. No one seems to want to touch it. But all we want, all I want, all we've ever wanted was to be treated with respect and some decency in the place. And that is impossible for them to do. So this is the continuation of that. Thankfully, in spite of the fact my girls have been homeless for quite some time now, my granddaughter hasn't had to go back in there. They haven't gone back into the dump. And every day I pray to God they won't have to, because I'm not there to protect them right now. And if I were there, the hospital would ban me because of their bogus, I made people uncomfortable. However, when I went in for the physical, no harsh, it went fine as far as the doctor clearly wasn't happy things went as well as they did, because that's their agenda, to blame my daughter for their own horrific abuse. But nothing happened that anyone could say, anyone did anything as far as raising their voice, swearing, nothing. It was, this is to keep me out so that I can't protect the girls next time. I can't be their witness. I can't know what's going on, and they'll be alone. And that is devastating to me. And that is why right now they are near Cedars-Sinai. It is crucial that they be able to switch hospitals. That is why I'm trying so hard to get them a place near Cedars-Sinai where they can start over and get away from this horrific, demonic place that will surely put them in that position again, is the first chance they get. And now I won't be there. And even if I were there, they would ban me from going in, with no trespass order, no reason, except we don't want you here and you made people uncomfortable. I stopped their wicked ways from being able to accomplish what they wanted because I was with the girls trying to buffer them and protect them. but they want to make sure that doesn't happen again. This is how they do things, the victim blaming, the turning around and abusing their power. And this is just part of the sickness of the whole city, the court, the landlord, the regional center, the hospital. Next week is SSI visit. More abuse. And they're, of course, notorious for their abuse of people when they go in. I realized and was told our situation there wasn't quite so unique. That is the way most people are treated when they go in there. That's for next week. And I could try to fill in the next few minutes, but it will go too long with the different things that happened. So I want to speak directly to my baby girl. Katie, you are a hero. A hero for Kitty Cat, our little baby girl. My granddaughter, you're a hero for Kitty Cat. You're a hero for Willie. He's got no one else in the world. And your loyalty and steadfast devotion to him is awe-inspiring. Your devotion to Michelle is awe-inspiring. Your love makes you unbreakable in the face of horrible abuse and prejudice. You are a warrior woman. I'm so proud of you. And I know you're surrounded by evil entities. And I know the darkness is just horrific for you. And they say things and blame you and try to demoralize you and make you feel less than worthy and make you feel like their failings are yours. Their failings are theirs. You're a wonderful mom and a wonderful partner to Willie. I love you dearly. I'm behind you 1,000,000%. And we're going to get this sorted and we're going to get this resolved. And I'm going to bring attention to the abuse that makes it feel like we went back in time to the Middle Ages where there were no rules and regulations. That's what it feels like out there right now, I know. But there are people in this world that do hate injustice. They do care about disabilities. They do care about children. And they will care. And I firmly believe that somebody will come forward and assist us in this. Hang in there, sweetheart, because you don't wear armor. You are the armor for Michelle and Willie. Hang in there, sweetheart.